evening, everyone. Could you please silence your phones like I'm doing right now, since one of our speakers finally arrived, and we can get started. Good. Yeah, perfect. Oh, right. All right. Wow. Good evening, everyone. Oh, I'm in a church and I get an answer. That's cool. That's really cool. I'm Terry Wilson, the president of the Avon Historical Society. I thank you for attending this evening's event for the Connecticut Freedom Trail dedication ceremony for a Civil War soldier from Avon. Because we are commemorating the military service of this soldier, I wish to begin by asking everyone who can to stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. The flag is back there. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. You can be seated. We're doing something to set the mood. We're taking you back in time to the era of the Civil War, 1861 to 1865. Gentlemen, you're going to be seated? Okay. You could be seated. Thank you. Before I give my greetings, I wish to introduce two others who would like to say a few words. Pastor Chris Salamini from this Avon Congregational Church will lead us off. Pastor Chris?
Welcome, everybody. My name is Chris Salamini. I'm the pastor of this church. And what we say on Sunday is no matter who you are or where you are on your life's journey, you are welcome here. Luckily, I'm so glad to know that the pastors for generations have been saying those same things, and even Private Leverett Holden has hopefully heard those words. Some of the important things I need to tell you are that the restrooms are located back in this hallway. I always go there if you need it. So should you even any time during the program today, you can make your way through these doors, and if you just go left, you will find restrooms. And then following today's event at 7, there is a reception, and I see there's some really good little goodies from Dom's next door, and we're so appreciative. I'm sure you're going to hear a lot of words from a lot of folks, but a lot of people put many years and a lot of time into this program, so thank you for being a part of this. Charles Hawley, writer for Connecticut Explored, writes, "For the first 2 bloody years of the American Civil War, men heavily debated the subject of allowing black people to enlist. Opponents argued that black people would not make good fighting men and that they lacked the military skills and fortitude to participate effectively in war. The argument, of course, ignored the fact that black people had fought in and made important contributions to every previous American war, most notably the Revolutionary War. In January 1863, President Lincoln signed the Emancipation Proclamation, a document that freed slaves in the border states and authorized the enlistment of black soldiers. Frederick Douglass addressed the 29th and the 30th Regiment of black soldiers, telling them in the words of his day, "You are pioneers of the liberty of your race. And not for yourselves alone are you marshaled. You are pioneers. On you depends the destiny of millions of the colored race in this country. If you rise and flourish, we shall rise and flourish. If you win freedom and citizenship, we shall share your freedom and citizenship." Words to live by then, and of course to live by today. Tonight you will learn about and we will honor one such noble hero, Private Leverett Holden, a resident of the town of Avon, and a man to whom we all owe a great deal of gratitude. And if you read this wonderful program that has been put into your hands tonight when you're snoozing and thinking about what a wonderful evening this was, you too, hopefully, will call him Lev, as he was known by his friends. Terry?
Thank you. Thank you, Pastor Chris. We're very pleased to have with us tonight Congresswoman Johanna Hayes from the 5th Congressional District of Connecticut, who would like to say some greetings as well.
Thank you. It is a pleasure to be here with so many of you to celebrate this occasion. As you all know or may not know, that I am a history teacher by profession, and I mean, it's who I am, it's what I love to do. And one of the things that my students would always say to me is that history is boring. And my response, as every history teacher would respond, is history is only boring when it's dead. When it is alive, when it is engaging, when it is relevant, not only is it impactful, but it brings you back to life. And I think that is what we are seeing here today. When history is taught in a way that it presents, it's relatable to individuals. It comes to life and causes you to experience things differently, then I think we are all drawn in. And that's what happened for me as I was reading about this event. I started to research and I started to look up articles. I did not know when I was in the classroom that Frederick Douglass had actually come to Connecticut to speak to the soldiers. I wish I had seen those words, but it took me down a rabbit hole, and I think that's what this dedication of this site on the Connecticut Freedom Trail does for all of us. When it's a series of disconnected facts and dates, it can feel dry and uninteresting. But when it's presented as a living narrative, a story of a human experience, a means of connecting to the present, it makes you want to have a conversation with that historical figure. It makes you want to learn more. It makes you want to know more. And I think today this is, for me, I think even more impactful because it reminds me that you cannot bury history. No matter how long it stays dormant, no matter how long we don't know about it, at the point where we do, it forces us to re-engage and to ask questions. And when past events are meaningful and important and impactful, they cannot be erased or suppressed. And I think at this moment in our history where there are just extraordinary lengths to diminish the history and the contribution of not only African Americans, not only blacks, not only Native Americans, but all people who do not, who are not part of the majority, I think today's events and events like that are that much more meaningful, that much more impactful, that much more important, because it reminds us that we are responsible for history. We are responsible for making sure that it is not erased, that it is not diminished, but that it is full and complete and evolving, that it is living, and that it is there for our children to learn and to grow from. And I have to tell you, as the representative for this district, I am just so incredibly grateful for the people of this community who thought it not robbery to make sure that history is intact, that we seek out the truth, that we present it in its fullest context, and that we use that information to present a better world for our children, to create collective and communal spaces, and to educate ourselves not only on our past, but on what is possible in our future. So thank you to the Avon Historical Society, to the Avon Congregational Church, to the Free Public Library, to the Senior Center, and most importantly, to the Connecticut Freedom Trail for your work on this very important project, which may seem small and insignificant, but as part of the greater mosaic and the landscape of our Connecticut history, and equally as important, our national and global history and the impacts and investments of all people from all communities. I just have to tell you, thank you for your work, and I don't even have the words to say how important it is, especially at this time and in this moment, because one of the things that I have learned throughout my time in history, in the Congress, is just having the information is not enough. Being good stewards of that information and using it to be better is what is required of us all. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Congresswoman Hayes. That was wonderful. I need to recognize the gentleman who brought you all the speakers in. These are members of the 8th and 14th Connecticut Regiments. So we thank you very much for your service tonight in helping this along. And I'd also like to introduce Warren Barnett, who is a descendant of the Connecticut 29th. His ancestor is on this banner. And I need to let you know, too, that Warren is a key player in the last 14 years of my research on Leverett Holden. He has challenged me with really good questions. And so much so that in the last month, thanks to John Mills, who you'll hear from shortly, everything's been blown wide open. So the booklet you received tonight is probably book 1. There's going to probably be a book 2. And might dispel some of the things that are in book 1. We don't know, but that's how history goes. And just like Congresswoman Hayes just said, you know, it just keeps evolving and it keeps going. So we'll have to see how that goes. But thank you, Warren, for all the work you do. He's representing his ancestor, Sergeant Empson Brown, who served in the Connecticut 29th Company C from Suffield, even though he was from Springfield. But he enlisted in Suffield, so we get to keep him. And Warren, thank you. And Warren also brought with us the replica of the Connecticut 29th flag, which is behind you. So if everybody wants, if you want to swing around and take a look. The original of that flag is in the Connecticut State Capitol. It was brought up from the cellar in 2014 during the commemoration of the Civil War that we all took part in, and we're very proud of that. So we are here to uplift the story of Private Leverett Holden, resident of Avon, who served in the Connecticut 29th Colored Infantry Regiment, Company D, in the United States Civil War, and formally dedicate his memorial stone in the cemetery behind us as the 164th site on the Connecticut Freedom Trail. He, like all the others listed on this wonderful banner here, there's 1,300 or so names on this banner, took an oath to serve this country at a time when black men had very little rights. Research into Private Holden began in 2011 when the Avon Historical Society partnered with the Avon Free Public Library in a 4-year commemoration of the Civil War. As we were writing grants for events, planning exhibits, doing book talks, I had a brief conversation with then director of the library who asked me a simple question. Did you know that there's a black Civil War soldier buried in Avon? She showed me a picture in a book of the stone you saw tonight. That simple question piqued my interest and changed my understanding of the United States Civil War. Page 3 of the booklet you have received tonight, the blue booklet, lists several people who have been very helpful in this process. A few are here tonight, and I wish to thank them publicly because of their support. You're welcome to stand or just wave so people know who you are. It has to start with history professor Matt Warschauer of Central Connecticut State University. He was the co-chair of the 150th commemoration who challenged all of us across this state to dig deep and explore our local history of that time. And it worked. It was Matt's suggestion this past March, just a few months ago, that that booklet be written so as to give future generations a scholarly roadmap of how research is done as a community. Tina Panic in the back from the library, who was our partner in all things Civil War, from 2011 to 2015, she helped us plan the book talks. She supported and shared in all of this research as well. Is Kevin? He's from the Connecticut State Library, and some of you may know he portrays Private William Webb, a soldier of the Connecticut 29th. He was here in this building in 2013 doing just that. But he was instrumental just 3 months ago as an archivist at the Connecticut State Library in finding out how Private Holden's memorial stone came to be in this cemetery 135 years ago this week, which is great. So we thank him. The members of the East Avon Cemetery Association who are here tonight, Otto and Barbara Rupert, Janet Carville, Pastor Chris Salamini, and Kent May, they allowed me to write a grant on their behalf to have ground-penetrating radar done around Holden's stone to determine if he's buried there. Radaring showed that there is no burial there, so this stone is a memorial stone. And Pat Moran, where are you, Pat? Everybody knows Pat. There we go. A member of the Historical Society who I became friends with during the commemoration. She's the benefactor of the booklet you received tonight and the reception that we'll have afterwards, and many aspects of the new Avon History Museum that we're opening on July 4th. Thank you, Pat. Nora Howard, up in the balcony, is the, who most of you know, is Avon's town historian and historian of this church. Her love of history and support of all things that the society does has been incredibly helpful to me, especially over this past year as we started planning this event. Lastly, I need to thank the 8 people who privately donated to the plaque next to his stone. That plaque was created to educate the public on Private Holden and the service of the Connecticut 29th Regiment. So to tell us more, I invited 3 friends who I serve with on the Connecticut Freedom Trail Selection Committee, John Mills, Tammy Denise, and Andre Keat. John Mills is a force of nature. Anybody who knows him knows this, and you'll see why in a minute. He brings the unknown stories to life through the Alex Brienne Corporation. His wife, Erica, is his partner in life and work. I don't know where Erica is right now. Oh, she's in the back, okay. Please make sure to look at the flyer inserted in your booklet about an event John and Erica are doing in Simsbury on June 19th, which is Juneteenth, about a black family whose story has never been told. And guess what? Leverett is tied to that family with some of the new research that John and Erica found, which will be in that second book. I worked with Tammy Denise as a tour guide at a museum here in Connecticut before the pandemic shut down everything. 2 years later, I saw that she was the outreach director for the Connecticut Freedom Trail. I immediately knew I had to ask her how to put Private Holden's service on that trail as a freedom seeker. Andre Keat is a storyteller. He's also passionate about Black history and works with the Farmington Historical Society, giving summertime tours of the Freedom Trail sites in that town. And there was just an article in the Valley Life magazine this week about it and all the tours that he does, so please, I hope you'll take advantage of that this summer. I've heard that his Juneteenth presentations are stellar, and I'm looking forward to that tonight. So, I've talked enough. I know you know I do this well. So I'm going to turn this over to John, who will then pass it to Tammy, who will then pass it to Andre. So thank you very much again for being here. I appreciate it very much.
All yours. All yours. Thank you so much, Terry. I don't normally, no, this is good. I don't normally prepare remarks. I normally just kind of speak about these people from the heart, but there's just so much that I wanted to share, and I knew I wouldn't be able to remember and organize it appropriately, so I wrote my words down. My name is John Mills. I'm the president of the Alex Brienne Corporation. We're a Connecticut-based 501c3 nonprofit. Our work is to research the formerly enslaved, give their history back to their descendants. We do reverse genealogy. We start with somebody in the past that's been mentioned once, and then follow that to someone who's living today. And then we attempt to inject their story into the communities where they lived, worked, or died. The purpose of that mission is to change the narrative of how we see the formerly enslaved, the unknown names, the people in the shadows. Regardless of whether our ancestors were rich or poor, owned land or worked the land, they mattered. Their ability to survive makes it so that I can stand here today speaking to you. So I want them to be seen from a place of reverence. This is a perspective I came to some 30 years ago when I learned my third great-grandfather, William Cooper, fought in the Civil War, buried today under a parking lot in Baltimore. I also learned of my second great-grandfather, Ned Mills. Mills, being the last name of a former enslaver, was freed in Texas on Juneteenth. My family tie to enslavement, the Civil War, and me having the surname of my family's former enslaver aligns directly to this story today, the story of Leverett Holden. In the mid-1600s, an Englishman named Randall Holden migrated from Salisbury, England to America. He is one of the original founders of Portsmouth, Rhode Island. He also joined 11 others to purchase land from Native Americans, establishing the town of Warwick, Rhode Island, in 1643. Many of his children and grandchildren owned enslaved people in Warwick. One of the enslaved individuals to this family was a black man named George. George was born around 1770 and freed around 1790. Enslaved with him and also freed was a man named Cato, who was one of the black governors in Warwick. Shortly after being freed, George decided to take his enslaver's surname, calling himself George Holden. Using that name, he moved to Ellington, Connecticut. In Ellington, George married Nancy Hill in 1794. They had 5 children. Their names were George Jr., who died at 11 months old, Aseneth, George II, Phoebe, and Stephen. In 1812, George Holden's wife, Nancy, died. Shortly after, George moved his family to Vernon, Connecticut, where he married Sylvia Thomas around 1818. With Sylvia, George Holden had another 5 children. Their names were David, Henrietta, Oliver, and 2 boys who were possibly twins. Their names were Emmerich and Leverett, the man we honor today. With 9 older brothers and sisters, Leverett had a large family, some of his siblings more than 20 years older than him. In 1820, 5 years prior to Leverett's birth, his oldest sister, Aseneth Holden, married a man named Peter Peterson and moved to Windsor, Connecticut. Leverett's parents decided to do the same, moving to Windsor prior to Leverett's 5th birthday. So Leverett was primarily raised in Windsor. Leverett's mother, Sylvia, was a well-documented member of First Congregational Church of Windsor. I imagine Leverett spent many Sundays there. Living nearby, and also part of the church, was Leverett's sister, Aseneth, and her husband, Peter Peterson, as well as Leverett's sister, Phoebe, and her husband, Abraham Thompson. Being the baby of the family and over 20 years younger than his married sisters who lived nearby, I imagine Leverett as being well protected and immensely loved, maybe even spoiled a little. Sometime prior to Leverett's 15th birthday, his father, George Holden, died. Leverett and his mother must have moved in with family because they are not listed in the 1840 census. In 1850, Leverett's mother, Sylvia, can be found living in Hartford with Leverett's brother, Oliver, who was a hotel cook. Leverett is living in the Elijah Wadsworth house, also in Hartford. In 1860, Leverett's brother Oliver still lives in Hartford with his wife and children, but their mother, Sylvia, is no longer listed in the state census. It appears she may have passed away. Leverett is 35 years old and now living in Avon. In his household is a 35-year-old woman named Mary Holden, and 2 kids, Sarah Holden, 14 years old, and Mary Holden, 10 years old. It's not clear as to whether this is Leverett's wife and children, or if these are simply family members living with Leverett. But more research needs to be done here. With the start of the Civil War in 1861, many black people were eager to serve. Unfortunately, the Militia Act of 1792 made it clear that you must be white to serve in a state militia. Even though many joined white regiments, but because of the law, their service is undocumented, only known because of their own personal memoirs. For example, Private Isaac J. Hill, who later enlisted in the 29th Connecticut Colored Regiment, says in his 1867 memoir that he joined the 3rd Pennsylvania Cavalry in 1861. He says he was in the Battle of Falls Church, Virginia, and the Battle of Fairfax Courthouse. Another 29th Connecticut Colored Regiment soldier, Sergeant Alexander Newton, says in his 1910 memoir that he joined the 13th New York Regiment in 1861. Neither ever received credit for that service. A few years prior to 1857, the Dred Scott Supreme Court decision established that black people, whether enslaved or not, were not and could never be citizens of the United States. The impact of that is they could not legally be drafted into the war. That means when black people chose to enlist, they generally were truly volunteers. In need of more men, President Lincoln signed into law the new Militia Act of July 17, 1862, allowing black men to serve in any military service that they are found competent. This was used as the basis to begin creating colored regiments, one of which was the 1st South Carolina Infantry Regiment, organized in August 1862 under General Rufus Saxton. They were a regiment of all formerly enslaved black men that participated in raids and skirmishes as early as November 1862, liberating enslaved people and recruiting them into the Union Army. With the Emancipation Proclamation going into effect on January 1st, 1863, which more explicitly stated the roles black men could be assigned, many other states began creating colored regiments, but not Connecticut. The Connecticut legislature felt that black men were simply not as capable as white men. But 11 months later, in November of 1863, Connecticut was informed by the federal government that they were 1,748 men short of their assigned quota of recruits. The federal government threatened Connecticut with a penalty if they did not provide those men by January 5th, 1864. With no other option, the Connecticut legislature reluctantly approved the creation of the 29th Connecticut Colored Regiment on November 18th, 1863. A month later, on December 15th, 1863, Leverett Holden enlisted in New Haven. He was assigned to Company D. Also enlisting was Benjamin Holden, the grandson of Cato, who was enslaved with Leverett's father in Rhode Island. Benjamin would later be captured by the Confederacy, dying in Danville, Virginia, as a prisoner of war on November 17, 1864. In addition, Leverett's sister, Asenath, had 4 grandsons who also enlisted in the 29th. Their names are Alfred Percy, Sylvester Percy, Earl Percy, Charles Percy, and Wallace Sands. Alfred and Sylvester did not deploy with the regiment, but the other 3 all served together in Company C. These were Leverett's grandnephews. So once again, Leverett had family all around him. Leverett and his grandnephews shared in witnessing Frederick Douglass speak to the regiment in New Haven on January 29, 1864. They shared in refusing to recognize the flag on March 8, 1864, a protest by the men of the 29th due to not receiving their promised enlistment bonus. They shared in witnessing the racism shown them by the citizens of Annapolis, who refused to speak to them. Captain Charles Griswold of Company B wrote home about the treatment of black men in Annapolis. In his letter, he said, "There seems to be a prejudice here against colored troops." In Beaufort, South Carolina, Leverett and his grandnephews shared in learning that they would be receiving $7 per month, $6 less than white soldiers. But on May 22nd, 1864, they shared in listening to General Rufus Saxton, who informed them that they would now be paid $13 per month, the same as white soldiers. General Saxton told them about how he raised a colored regiment 2 years prior, in 1862. If you recall, that was the 1st South Carolina Infantry Regiment that I mentioned earlier. General Saxton said to the men of the 29th, "Although your skins are dark, you have the same muscle as white men and the same courage to fight." He went on to say, "If you ever want to make good soldiers, you must look a white man straight in the face and let him know that you are a man." Leverett and his grandnephews would go on to fight in battles at Petersburg, Chapin's Farm, Richmond, Darbytown Road, and Kell House. They would share in being the first soldiers to enter Richmond, the burning capital of the Confederacy, on April 3rd, 1865. They also witnessed President Abraham Lincoln and his 12-year-old son, Tad, arrive the next day to tour the devastation and to tell the formerly enslaved that they were now free. On November 11th, 1865, when the regiment docked in New Orleans on their journey back to Connecticut, Leverett and his grandnephews shared in marching through the principal streets of New Orleans, celebrated as heroes. The regiment also stopped in New York on November 22nd, 1865. Leverett and his grandnephews shared in being paraded down Broadway in Manhattan, passing the famous St. Nicholas Hotel on their way to camp at Central Park, celebrated once again as heroes. But while in Manhattan, Leverett and his grandnephews also shared in learning the sobering news that although they fought valiantly and were being celebrated in New Orleans and New York, the citizens of Connecticut had voted the month prior, on October 2nd, 1865, to not allow black men to vote. Connecticut was their next stop, so the regiment's feelings about coming back here were now not as joyous. Private Isaac J. Hill wrote, "The boys of the 29th were feeling somewhat indignant in reference to the treatment they received from their state, it not giving them their rights." Here in Connecticut, there was a concern that white Americans would not show up to celebrate black soldiers. In an attempt to convince Connecticut citizens to show up, an article appeared in the Hartford Courant that read, "1,400 black soldiers who have gone forth to battle for many white men who have remained at home and abused them and their race. These in line ought to feel proud of their achievements, and loyal men and women will be proud of them. Give them a hearty welcome, filling the good old flag out, and let them feel that the people of Hartford appreciate patriotism in a black man as well as in a white." On arrival in Connecticut on November 24th, 1865, Leverett and his grandnephews shared in standing on Central Row, the street on the south side of the Connecticut Old State House, listening to Governor Buckingham celebrate their bravery while also apologizing to them for the state not giving them their right to vote. The governor said, "Although Connecticut now denies you privileges which it grants to others for no other apparent reason than because God has made you to differ in complexion, justice will not always stand far off. Be patient, be true to yourself." They also heard from Mayor Stillman, General Hawley, and the colonel of the 29th, Colonel William Worcester. Colonel Worcester said the men deserved more honor because when they entered the service, their pay was but $7 a month, and it was known that every black soldier captured by the rebels would suffer punishment by death. Leverett and his grandnephews knew that to be true because, as stated earlier, Benjamin Holden was captured and killed. At the conclusion of the speeches, the men were escorted by the Connecticut National Guard and a marching band paraded through the streets of Hartford. People cheered as they walked up Main to Pratt Street, turning on Trumbull and headed to Church Street, down Church to Ann, up Ann to North Main, down Main to Buckingham, up Buckingham to Washington, ending at a camp on Park Street. They were discharged the next day. In 1897, nearly 130 years ago, a monument was installed in Boston, honoring Colonel Robert Gould Shaw and the 54th Massachusetts Colored Regiment. It was installed directly across the street from the Massachusetts State House and still stands today. Here in Connecticut, although, the men of the 29th Regiment and the overflow Connecticut 30th Colored Regiment endured racism, were approved to organize only due to federal quota pressure, were initially paid less than white soldiers, fought valiantly in the Richmond-Petersburg campaign, and learned of the state denying them the right to vote on return. There has never been any mention on or near the Connecticut Old State House, nor anywhere along the parade route, indicating they were ever there. Not even today. A monument exists in New Haven at Grapevine Point, now called Crisqualo Park, which is where the 29th and 30th were organized. But that monument is missing over 700 of the black men who enlisted and were organized there. Of the missing names are two of Leverett's grandnephews, Earl Percy and Charles Percy. It's also missing Isaac J. Hill, whose memoir is used across the country and was the basis for Alexander Newton's 1910 account of the experiences of the 29th. Ironically, the names of white officers are replicated on the Crisqualo Park Monument for each time they promote it. Thus, the historic perception and ideals of value based in color, the very thing these black men were fighting against, is unwittingly perpetuated today on the walls of the monument's marble facade, as if we'd walked back in time. It's my hope that one day we correct this monument as well as the erasure of their story and presence at Connecticut's old State House. We don't own the sins and biases of bias and erasure of the past. But once we know the conscious perpetuation of its effects becomes our sin. My wife Erica and I put all we had into an attempt to deepen Leverett's story, to help in defining the narrative. What we discovered is Leverett Holden's family story is broad and deep, full of people and places previously unknown. It includes enslavement, emancipation, migration, family, hard work, religion, service, and sacrifice. It has all the elements of injustice that preceded Juneteenth, the selflessness of character and strength of agency that brought us to Juneteenth, and the injustices that continued long after. That lone stone that stands just outside of this church bears only Leverett's name. But don't think of it as just a cenotaph for Leverett. It must stand in as the visual representation of a legacy of strength and agency of an entire family, representing the many people who love Leverett, yet have no stories or stones. But not only that, now that we know so much about Leverett's story, it becomes a stand-in for many black Americans whose history is unknown, the many souls who were never documented. As Martin Luther King Jr. once said, "Everything that we see is a shadow cast by that which we do not see." Well, that lone stone is a shadow cast by that which cannot be seen. God bless you.
Okay, that deserves a big wow. Wow, thank you. You can see why there's a book 2 coming. Just to let you know, John and Erica spent quite a amount of time to find every single name of every single man who served in the 29th and then later 30th, which became the USCT 31st later. They're all on here that they could find, and it corrects what the monument in New Haven doesn't have. So when you get a chance, come up later and take a look at it, because from the back you don't really see the names, but up here you certainly will. And you can find Leverett on, I think he's the 4th column over. You can find Percy family. There's other families as well as Warren's ancestor, Brown, is there. So, okay, Tammy. Boy, that's something to follow. Good for you. Thank you.
Greetings, everyone. I am Tammy Denise, Outreach Director for the Connecticut Freedom Trail, and it is my job to go into the community to educate about the Freedom Trail. The Freedom Trail was established in August of 1995 by law, the General Assembly, to exist to tell the stories of Black narratives and the Black contributions to the making of Connecticut. In its almost 30-year history, I am the first outreach director, and so this has been an ongoing thing for me, and I appreciate all of you for being here this evening. The goal of the Connecticut Freedom Trail is to have a monument, something that symbolizes the story of all 169, what are they called? Towns, 169 towns or municipalities. That's the word I'm looking for. And it is because Black people were all over Connecticut. Today, in certain pockets, it's seems to be unheard of or just hard to believe that they really were there. So that is the goal of the Connecticut Freedom Trail. Now, it was established in August of 95, opened the year later in September of 1996, in 65 towns with 30 monuments. Today, we are upwards to 180 within 70 towns. So you see, I still have work to do. And that's why I need the public's help to help me to get it established more. So if you know of any historical sites within your town or surrounding towns that you think should be on the Freedom Trail, please reach out so that I can go out and investigate. Now, this year will be the 30th anniversary of the Connecticut Freedom Trail being established. I love to brag that the Freedom Trail is the jewel of Connecticut. It's been hidden, so I'm working on shining more light on it. Boston has a 2.5-mile Freedom Trail. Connecticut's Freedom Trail is the entire state. No matter where you enter Connecticut, there's a site that's already established or will be established. And it is something to be proud of. It not only touches on local history or local neighborhoods, but it also goes to tourism, which can also help to bolster our local communities. Now, when Terry and I, we've known each other for a little while. We were guides at a local museum, and when she found out I was the outreach director, she was very supportive, and she told me the story of Private Leverett Holden. And so we worked together, and we got him onto the Freedom Trail. Now, to have him on the Freedom Trail is a jewel for Avon, but it's also a jewel for Connecticut as well as the nation, because again, he was a part of those who helped fight for the freedom for all. And so Avon should definitely be proud of this story, but it's nice to know that his story touches on different parts of Connecticut, thanks to the research of John and Erica Mills. So we are very thankful for that. Can we please give them a round of applause? To show our appreciation. So thank you so very much for that. So at this time, what I normally do is once I find a site and the site has been put onto the Freedom Trail, the brass plaque that you see out there is what goes to the organization or to the home, and they also get a flag. September is Connecticut Freedom Trail Month, where all of the sites will hang out their flags, so you should see a lot of yellow and black flags flying throughout Connecticut. Now, the 180 sites that we have, most of them are privately owned homes, but those homes once held abolitionists, people who were supportive of those Underground Railroad, civil rights, concepts of freedom, and there's one more. There's freedom seekers. There's four categories to qualify to be on the Freedom Trail. And so when you drive around Connecticut and you now see this yellow flag or that brass plaque, now you know that that's a site on the Connecticut Freedom Trail, and it has a story to tell. Now, most of them are homeowners, but we do have about 30 public sites. They are ancient burying grounds. They are museums. They are plaques along the road where you will see them, like with Private Leverett. So they are there. They exist, and we have to continue to bring those to the fore so that this jewel can shine, especially in today's climate of trying to erase important history. So as I close, because there's no way I can follow Mr. Mills, and I will not try, but I just wanted to make sure that everyone understood the significance and the importance of the Connecticut Freedom Trail. Connecticut played a very big role, but the Black community played a very big, important role, and it's been hidden. So it's up to us, all of us who are interested in this history, who knows this history. Like I said, we would be committing the sin if we allow it to be buried again. So as I close, I would like to have Terry come up and present her with the Connecticut Freedom Trail flag for Private Holden's grace. Thank you so very much. Yes, okay. Now, as in closing, what I would like to do is help you to understand the different sites that is on the Freedom Trail. Not only are there houses, there's public places. One such one is close by. It is the Farmington Historical Society that is a part of the Amistad. That was the other one, the Amistad. So it's the Amistad, Sites of Consciousness, Civil Rights, and the Underground Railroad. The Farmington Historical Society has a tour now where they will take you on 9 different stops, and you get to see history come to life with those 9 stops telling the Amistad story. Andre, could you please stand? He is the tour guide, and you will also get to hear him do some Juneteenth stories. He is the creator of those programs. Thank you. And then we have Miss Nicole Thomas. She's the site administrator for the Hempstead Houses, which also has an Amistad connection, but they have a great connection with the Underground Railroad. So Nicole, could you please stand? Thank you. The Hempstead Houses, thank you, is located in New London, Connecticut. So you see we have different connections all over the state, and we also have our very first African American History Museum that is in Stratford, Connecticut. It is the Ruby and Calvin Fletcher African American History Museum, our very first one, and hopefully it will not be our last. So in closing, I thank each and every one of you for coming out this evening. Terry, thank you for allowing me to be a part of this because it was so important to the Freedom Trail. But thank y'all all so very much. And so now I will turn it over to Mr. Andre Kitt.
So, People Magazine, the Amsterdam News, the Slave Narratives of Texas, edited by Tyler and Murphy, and my cousin, Angela Jennings of St. Kofa Traveling Museum, have informed my research and talk about Juneteenth and Black History tonight. And John, there's gonna be a place for you too. Well, June 19th is known as Freedom Day, Emancipation Day, Juneteenth, June 19th. It's a combination of those two, June and the 19th, forming Juneteenth. It was on that day in 1865 that Union soldiers led by Major General Gordon Granger made their way to Texas, where the last of the nation's slaves were held. He announced in Galveston that the Civil War had ended and they were finally free. President Abraham Lincoln's Emancipation Proclamation had become official more than 2.5 years earlier on January 1st, 1863. But Texas slaves were the last to know. Lincoln's emancipation was issued as the country was in the throes of the Civil War, leaving few soldiers available to enforce the president's executive order. Southern slaveholders were not ready to release their property. However, with the surrender of Confederate General Robert E. Lee officially ending the war and the arrival of Granger's regiment, Texas was forced to finally free its slaves. But why did it take more than 2.5 years? There are 3 theories that have been handed down over the years. The most popular is that a messenger sent to deliver the news was murdered on his way to Texas. But why would a single messenger be sent to deliver such an important order? Order number 3. Another theory is that the news was deliberately withheld to maintain the workforce on Texas plantations. Still another story is that the federal troops purposefully sat on the news to allow plantation owners to harvest one last crop before enforcing Lincoln's executive order. Susan Merritt, a liberated woman who was interviewed shortly after her emancipation in Texas, said, "I heard about the freedom in September, and they were picking cotton. And a white man rode up to Massa's house on a big white horse, and the houseboy told Massa a man wanted to see him, and he hollered, 'All right, stranger.' It was a government man, and he had a big book and a bunch of papers and said why Massa hadn't turned the niggers loose. Massa said he was trying to get the crop out, and he told Massa to have the slaves in. Uncle Stephen blew the cow horn, which they used to call in to eat, and all the niggas came running 'cause the horn meant come to the big house, quick. That man read that paper telling us we were free, but Massa made us work several months after that. He said he got 20 acres land and a mule, that we would get that. But we didn't get it. Lots of niggas were killed after freedom, because the slaves in Harrison County were turned loose right after freedom, and those in Rusk County weren't. But they heard about it and ran away to freedom in Harrison County, and their owners had them bushwhacked. Now you use your imagination to figure that out. They were shot down. You could see lots of niggas hanging to trees in Sabine Bottom right after freedom, because they caught them swimming across the Sabine River and they shot them. There sure are going to be lots of souls crying against them in judgment. Now, General Granger read General Order Number 3. The people of Texas informed that in accordance with a proclamation from the executive of the United States that all slaves are free. This involves an absolute equality of rights and rights of property between former masters and slaves, and the connection heretofore existing between them becomes that between employer and hired labor. The freedmen are advised to remain quietly at their present homes and work for wages. They are informed that they will not be allowed to collect at military posts, and that they will not be supported in idleness either there or elsewhere. Former slaves were overjoyed while their former masters were in shock. Even though they had nowhere to go, newly freed blacks quickly left the plantations. Many headed north to start new lives, while others headed to the neighboring states of Louisiana, Arkansas, and Oklahoma. Juneteenth marked the celebration of long-awaited freedom and would become one of our most joyous and important cultural events, with many elements of those early celebrations still a part of our modern-day festivities. Now, my cousin Angela tells me of Sankofa Traveling Museum that another thing that could have happened was a black regiment, and this is where you come in. You gotta help me. You gotta help me sometime. A black regiment was on a boat going down south on the coast, and there was a storm. They didn't even mean to stop there. Got off the ship, and their major, their general, didn't even get off the ship. And it was the regiment that came, and they tacked the order onto the door of a local church, a black church. And it was the minister of that church that read the order to his congregants, and then the word spread. Now that's what I heard. We're gonna talk about that. Getting the party started, because the main focus of Juneteenth celebration is on education and self-improvement, but what's a celebration without family, fun, and, yes, food? Everyone back then brought a dish to share, but you couldn't have a Juneteenth celebration without strawberry soda and a barbecue pit full of pork. Whew. Lamb and beef. You got invited to the barbecue. You got invited to the cookout. In Texas and some other southern states, the traditional drink on Juneteenth is the big red soda. This variety of cream soda is a sweet soft drink flavored with orange and lemon oils and vanilla. It is available in different flavors with or without caffeine and sugar for those who are watching that. Besides the chance to relax and catch up with friends and family, there were a host of activities to enjoy, like horseback riding and fishing. Juneteenth was also an occasion to dress up. During early celebrations, former slaves threw their ragged clothes into the creeks and rivers and wore new garments that had been taken from their former plantations. Juneteenth celebrations were usually held in rural areas or on church grounds. Eventually, as blacks became landowners, special areas were dedicated for their celebrations. One of the first land purchases for Juneteenth was organized by the Reverend Jack Yates. This former slave and pastor organized a fundraiser to purchase Emancipation Park in Houston, Texas. And in 1898, Booker T. Washington Park in Mexico, Texas, became an official Juneteenth celebration site, with some 20,000 people visiting in 1 week in one of the state's largest celebrations. Juneteenth remained popular and continued to thrive and grow, but by the early 1900s, there was a decline, mostly due to economic and cultural changes. Hard times forced many blacks to head north to find work. Urban life made it hard to celebrate unless the date fell on a weekend. The importance of Granger's announcement on June 19th became buried even deeper when July 4th was established as the day of national independence. But Frederick Douglass had something to say about that. He said in his famous oratory speech, "What to the slave is the 4th of July?" It's not only a brilliant work of oratory, it speaks to our every frustration spurred by the gap between the ideals of the United States and the reality that we witness every single day. Sound familiar? The Poor People's Campaign in Washington, D.C. in 1968 led to a renewed interest in Juneteenth. So most of us, we just call that the March on Washington. Many of those attended the historic march returned home eager to celebrate black culture. Juneteenth celebrations began happening in places where they had never happened before. And today, Juneteenth is celebrated throughout the country as a full or partial state holiday, with local and national organizers picking up the mantle of promoting African American history and culture. Today, Juneteenth is a national holiday in the United States. Hallelujah. It was officially designated as a federal holiday by President Joe Biden in June of 2021. This means that it is a legal public holiday observed by the federal government, and many states have also adopted it as a state holiday as well. Now, when President Joe Biden officially made Juneteenth a federal holiday in 2021, there was one person in the audience for whom the moment was the culmination of a lifelong effort. They call her the grandmother of Juneteenth, Miss Opal Lee. Lee, who is from Fort Worth, Texas, sat in the front row as Biden signed the Juneteenth National Independence Day Act into law. She also received a standing ovation from the crowd at the behest of the president, who called her an incredible woman. "I got so many different feelings all gurgling up in here," Lee said, now about 98 years old. She told the CBS affiliate KTVT at the time, "I don't know what to call them all. I'm so delighted to know that suddenly we've got a Juneteenth. It's not a Texas thing or a black thing, it is an American thing." Now every state had has at some point passed a resolution recognizing Juneteenth, at least as a day of observance, even those that do not count Juneteenth among their official public holidays. We wait a little bit. An observance is a day of awareness that isn't accompanied by a day off, but we wait a little bit, just like our weather. In fact, except for Texas, all states that currently recognize Juneteenth as a public holiday commemorated it as a day of observance, years before it became an official state holiday anyway. Florida, Oklahoma, Minnesota were the first states outside of Texas to commemorate Juneteenth as a day of observance in the 1990s. The flag, just pass out. The flag uses the colors red, white, and blue of the American flag. Featured prominently in the center of the flag is a bursting star. Running through the center of the flag horizontally is an arc that is meant to symbolize the new horizon of opportunity for Black people. On June 19th, take a moment to remember our ancestors and the price they paid for the freedom we enjoy today. The freedom we're trying to instill, the freedom we're trying to hold on to. Remember our great history of culture, courage, and triumph. Juneteenth is a day to celebrate family, friends, culture, and yes, community.
Thank you, Andre. Wow, what an evening. So, in honor of Juneteenth, as I said, there's a flyer in your book of an event that's happening in Simsbury on June 19th. Now you know what it's all about. To raise up a family in Simsbury. Friends from the Simsbury Historical Society are here tonight. They are organizing it with John and with Erica. It's expected to be a very big event. I really encourage you to attend if you possibly can. It is a work day. It is 10 o'clock in the morning, but that's how sometimes these things go. So if not, John is really good at recording everything and posting all of his events on his website the next day. So I know tonight's is being recorded. It will be on his website tomorrow, the Alex Brion Corporation. And I neglected to name the person who started this journey for me. Ginny Vaselli, where are you? There she is. She's a former director of the Avon Library. She's the one that asked the question that led to us being here tonight. So I wanted to make sure that she was recognized. Thank you, Ginny. All right, you are all welcome to join us for a reception in Fellowship Hall. You can go through either of these doors. It takes you down the hallway to it. There's some goodies, and you're welcome to stay and chat with everybody and talk to our presenters and also our reenactors. Thank you all very much for coming. I truly appreciate it. Thank you.
Sure.
I wanted to just take a picture with all of us, Senator Hayes and that, and then in front of it, if we can get it in front of this thing, it would be nice. I think we let people go through real quick though. Yeah. I like Erica. Hi. Good to see you. How are you? Good.
That's good.
Good. Do you know Dan?
John Mills.
Hi,
He
nice
used
to
to
meet you. I
work
think I
with
met you
us.
at the conference.
Oh, at the conference. Yeah, I remember that.
That was
able to do this.
Yeah,
Get
yeah.
people to
It
kinda
was
hear
very
the story.
passionate. Like I love, even though we were reading it, like